So let's open up the show by talking about why Alien Covenant is the better of the quote unquote Blade Runner sequels that we've gotten this year.
Every leap of civilization was built off the back of slaves. Replicants are the future, but I can only make so many. I had the luck, and he has the key. I think I found him.
That's not possible. If this gets out, we've bought ourselves a war.
Am I back?
Yes, you are.
Fucking shit.
Okay. Was that intentional?
Yes.
Okay, that's fair.
Do you want to try starting this again?
Yes. Let's do that.
Without mentioning a certain group of words?
Yeah. Okay. So, hello. Welcome back to the Waffle Press.
Why'd you fucking do that? You piece of shit. Now I'm in a fucking bad mood. Okay, I got a lot. I'm gonna go on a bit of a rant real quick.
Okay.
And you cannot interrupt me.
Okay.
When I do this rant.
Okay.
So I just got out of Blade Runner 2049 about 30 minutes ago. It was long. It was boring. A lot of scenes lasted longer than they maybe should have. There's some metatextual shit going on in it that I kind of found annoying. The main characters were not very interesting. And in fact, there were a lot of side characters who were more interesting than the main character. It seemed to be really impressed with showing off its special effects, even though in the age of digital, it kind of makes those effects not as amazing as this would have been had it been made in the 80s. There's some contradictory ideas going on in the film. It felt twice as long as its runtime. And because of all that, I think it might be the best film I've seen all year. Because it was a Blade Runner sequel. And I love Blade Runner. So, yeah, I loved it.
Okay. I was not expecting that.
I know a lot of people might be very confused about my logic here. But we'll get into it more, but I loved it.
Okay.
And I'm looking forward to watching it again at some point. Not in the theater, but I will watch it again. I mean, I guess we should just both say what we think about Blade Runner real quick. I'm guessing people who regularly listen to the show know what you think.
Yeah. So why don't you go ahead with that too? Just double up on that.
And you think it's an overrated piece of shit?
No. Well,
no. No, I love the original Blade Runner, and it's a very flawed film, but it's got a lot in it that overcomes a lot of the flaws. Like, I've heard a lot of complaints about Blade Runner over the years that I think are all entirely valid, and it doesn't stop it from being a great movie, in my opinion. Closest being is that Harrison Ford kind of rapes the chick in it, but
I have a thing on that. Here, let's do a mini discussion on the original Blade Runner, and then we'll just devote the rest of this to Blade Runner 2049 because there's a lot to talk about that.
And we'll be constantly going back to the original Blade Runner as we talk about Blade Runner 2049 anyway. So
yeah, you really can't not talk about both when you're talking about them. Mm-hmm. And not in a way that feels cheap, I would say.
Yeah, it wasn't that was the thing. This was like a really interesting nostalgia trip, which we've been getting a lot of lately. But it's not, the same as going to see The Force Awakens and being like, oh, the Millennium Falcon and all this stuff. It's literally like, wow, we're actually getting another Blade Runner movie. And it really, it didn't feel like... The thing that was amazing to me about the whole movie was that it never felt like it was trying to turn Blade Runner into something it's not, you know? Which was my fear when I was reminded at the very beginning that it was a Sony production. So, you know, like this very easily could have been turned into like Blade Runners just running down hallways shooting at each other
Oh my god,
for
yeah.
2 hours. I mean, like literally, we're the same length except just fighting, and it would have been significantly worse.
Yeah. Maybe it would have looked cool still. I mean, he got Roger Deakins, but it wouldn't have been this.
Yeah, well, I mean, I don't think this is going to sound really weird, but I don't think looking great is like a major accomplishment in this day and age.
I would agree.
Because a lot of people, you know, do a great job at making great looking movies these days, including movies that are just awful. So you can make a movie that looks like Blade. There's a lot of movies out there that look like Blade Runner, and they're not Blade Runner. So, and we don't really remember those movies too often.
Yeah, that's true. But I would toss in that asterisk. This year, I think for the most part, even the big budget movies, they all have a nice look to them, you know. And even like movies that have been like awful, I'm like, yeah, you know what? They look like a legitimate movie production. But then like a year ago, it was like bad. Specifically, the big budget stuff. They looked flat, and they were shot awfully, and everything looked like concrete.
We had those big budget movies all come out really quickly that looked like they had all been rushed, like, you know, like the Fantastic Four reboot. And you'd get like scenes in it that like were really well done, the special effects mixed with scenes that looked like they were shot in someone's backyard.
Yeah.
And so, but I this year I have been really impressed. I mean, I would like there was a preview for Geostorm before the new Blade Runner I saw, and I was kind of amazed at how good the effects looked in Geostorm. Such a dumb movie idea, but hey.
Which I will be watching in IMAX with a group of friends, hopefully. I haven't convinced anybody to join me besides our friend Patrick Campbell over from Real Film Chatter, so
well,
yeah.
Good luck with that.
Thanks. We're gonna have a couple beers.
I will be sitting at home.
Oh, I can't wait. But let's talk about the original Blade Runner now.
All right, what version did you first see?
The first version I saw was actually the director's cut. So here's a story. I mentioned it before. I had appendicitis, right? And I was bedridden for a week. You know,
That's how Houdini died. You know.
Really?
Yeah, appendicitis.
Oh shit! Sorry, dude. And I had a bunch of iTunes gift money from Christmas because I got appendicitis like a couple weeks after Christmas. It was like in January. And I was like, oh, well, I'll buy some movies. You know, I hear that Blade Runner is pretty good. And this is right around the time I'm really getting into movies, like hardcore, like reading a bunch of film criticism online and everything. Before you find out everyone's just a fucking creep. And then I watched
We're looking at you, Harry Knowles.
Fucker.
Stop sending me messages.
And
I'm sorry. Fuck that guy.
Yeah, fuck that guy. And so I watched Blade Runner, and I was pretty in and out of it for like about a week after appendicitis. For whatever reason, I wasn't like healing properly or whatever. And I felt like I had watched like a fever dream, and I was like, whoa, like that made me like feel something. I'm gonna watch that again. So that I just watched it like continuously throughout the week. I have like a stack of movies I was gonna watch while I was recuperating, and then I just kept watching Blade Runner. And I couldn't explain why I liked it, but I liked the way it made me feel. I liked the texture of the world. I liked the melancholy. And then, you know, as they go on, then you find out about the theatrical cut. I'm like, oh, I wonder what's different. And I was like, oh boy, that voiceover does it no favors. So, yeah, that was my first little experience with Blade Runner.
Yeah, that's an interesting way to be introduced to Blade Runner.
How about you?
Well, all right, hold on. First, real quick side story, because I just have something similar to that where I watched the second Hellraiser film on like a ton of cough syrup because I was really sick. And I like started, like I crawled into the corner of my bed and started crying because I thought I was hallucinating the movie. because it was so insane, and I thought I was losing my mind. And then I rewatched it later without any medication, and it turned out the movie was just that insane. Anyone who's seen Hellraiser 2 knows what I'm talking about. So that was an interesting experience. And similar to your appendicitis thing, I've been suffering from chronic illness for about a decade at this point.
I'm very
So
sorry.
I've had a lot of time to watch movies. Anyone following me on Twitter right now knows I'm going through 100 horror films this month.
Yay!
I got through 0 today because of Blade Runner and then doing this. So I got a lot of catching up to do. But I saw Blade Runner. I don't remember when. I just remember, like, at some point you start looking up like what are considered the best movies ever. And if you're in any geek circles, there's always someone talking about Blade Runner in some corner of the room. And so at some point I was like, I better watch Blade Runner. And I watched it, and I kind of stopped paying attention about halfway through because I got really bored. Then I'm just kind of like, I was thinking about it a lot, and I was like, maybe I missed something with Blade Runner. So I revisited it, and I still didn't really care for it. And then about 6 more times watching it, and then I was like, oh, okay, I get it. So that's my Blade Runner adventure. I would say I only got Blade Runner like a year ago. So I've been watching it like on and off for the past 10 years.
Okay. Well, I mean, everyone's different. I mean, I have another friend who we watched Texas Chainsaw Massacre on the big screen recently together, and he was saying how, like, yeah, he didn't feel Blade Runner until very recently either, but now it's like something he just adores, and he also loved Blade Runner 2049.
Yeah. I mean, it's one of those movies that it doesn't, if you bring certain ideas to it, you're not going to enjoy it. Like, if you're going in expecting, like, like really good detective film with robots, you're not going to get that. You really have to get into its rhythms. And that doesn't mean that it's not flawed and that you're not, like, because I'm kind of sounding like I'm saying, turn your brain off, which is not what I'm saying. I'm just saying at some point, I think you can learn to live with Blade Runner's flaws and discover its real value, which there is a lot. And it significantly outweighs problems I've always had with the movie. And some movies I just don't think play very well the first time you see them. Like, the first time I saw Vertigo, I was like kind of really creeped out by it. And then when I rewatched it, I was like, oh, I get it. And it does not play well with a crowd, because I saw it with a crowd once, and literally, like, at the end of it, there was like people going, what the fuck was that? So certain movies are just like that. This is just an example of how not all movies fit into neat categories of story structure or character development.
Yeah, this is one of the prime examples. It's why, like, Save the Cat bullshit is bullshit.
Yeah, that's
anyways.
It is. All that shit is about selling screenplays.
Yeah, which,
I mean,
sure. I mean, I get why there's a comfort to that. I mean,
there's a value in learning those things, and there's a value in understanding the 3-act structure, which is a real thing. But it's wrong to approach every movie thinking it should meet those things. And it's wrong to write a movie intentionally trying to hit all those beats. Because those aren't the things that make movies interesting. Like, and Blade Runner, the original Blade Runner, is literally filled with all the stuff that make movies great, minus the structure and characters.
Yeah, right. It really is, like, it's very much like a long gestating mood piece.
Yeah.
That just happens to be one of the greatest films ever made.
Yeah, I mean, that's fucking how that shit works. I mean, and I mean, that's why I love movies like, 2001, which also, like, basically has no characters. I mean, the most developed character in that movie much like Blade Runner, is an artificial intelligence. And everyone else is kind of a prop. Um, it's I'm trying to like I'm a little fucking zonked from just getting out of the movie because it was a Blade Runner 2049 was kind of oppressive, um, especially because they had the sound up so loud in my theater. I mean, a little too loud, but that's a whole other thing. Um, but no, the original Blade Runner, it's just, I mean, just looking at it, even going back to it today, and watch the director's cut instead before you watch the final cut. Anyone out there who hasn't bothered and for some reason is listening to this, because the director's cut leaves in a lot of the flaws that just happen to a movie that ages over the years. Final cut cleans it up a little bit, and I got nothing against doing that as long as you preserve the original version. And I think it's important to watch Blade Runner with its flaws because it still looks amazing. Even the not cleaned up version of Blade Runner looks pretty fucking amazing for its time.
You know, I actually, minus some of the cleanup stuff, and one shot in particular at the end I want to talk about. I prefer the director's cut. Something about the colorization in the final cut, I don't think it looks that nice. I like the colors in the director's cut, but the way they clean up like the sky and some of the background stuff, it looks fucking awesome on Blu-ray.
Mm-hmm.
And the shot when, I guess, spoilers for the original Blade Runner in 2049 for the rest of this, when after the Tears in the Rain monologue, and Roy lets the dove fly away, and the dove flies into the clouds. In the director's cut, they just shot it like in the back of some warehouse, and it doesn't look good. It's just like, oh wow, there's like no cloud. Just okay, that's it. And then the final cut, it's like this gorgeous, like like an impressionist painting with the dove flying away, and it's just like that quality is so vast and like, oh my god. But like besides that, I prefer the director's cut.
Yeah.
Which is an odd thing to hear, I guess.
I don't know. I think people tend to agree. I don't know. Blade Runner fans can be a little weird.
Yeah.
Because it's like a movie that has like 7 cuts.
Yeah, which is I think one of the reasons why Blade Runner 2049 was never really gonna make that much money. Some people are like, "How did this happen?" And I'm like, "Well, no one knows this movie exists outside of film circles.
Mm-hmm.
It might be a problem for a
Well, I literally just watched Blade Runner 2049 with someone who never thought Harrison Ford was a replicant.
Oh.
And went through the whole movie, and then I said that in the car, and they went, "What?" And that person loved the movie, so I don't know what to say about that, but because that's always a weird thing about, you know, the original Blade. There's a lot of debate still, even with 2049 out. There's always going to be that debate about whether or not Deckard's a replicant, and whether or not it was intended by Ridley Scott, which I don't think matters, but
yeah,
because Ridley Scott. Look up any interview where he tries to explain how Deckard is a replicant, and then realize Ridley Scott might be an insane person.
I think you get more out of the movie if Deckard's a human because he's learning about his own humanity, not a robot learning about humanity. Like I get the interesting concept of like, oh, a machine designed to hunt other machines, but then spoilers again, Blade Runner 2049 confronts that same idea. So it's like, well, you get that anyway. So I'm just gonna go around with my belief that Deckard is indeed a man who maybe thought he was not at one point, but you know, not important.
I don't think the answer matters. I think that's kind of what the point is. Like, it doesn't really matter. So shut the fuck up, Ridley Scott. Because it's more about like how that line is now like forever blurred between replicant and humanity. And that's kind of one of the thoughts it leaves you with. Which is another thing. Blade Runner leaves you with a lot of questions. And that can frustrate people. Or it can make you want to rewatch a movie over and over again, even a movie you're not sure you like. So, I don't know. So Blade Runner, I think, I think it's a classic. It's one of the best movies ever. Took me a little while to really get into its groove, but I've seen it more than a lot of other movies. So
It's
check.
it's my favorite science fiction film, and yeah, there are definitely issues, and one of the big point of contentions is obviously when Deckard forces himself onto Rachel, and
Yeah,
yeah, and I want to believe that that is not meant to be portrayed in a positive light, but Ridley Scott's a weird dude, and I can't say for certain whether he is. But my read of it after its most recent viewing and for a while now um, is that Deckard, the humans are pieces of shit. You know, they're also far less interesting than the replicants,
yeah,
and so he doesn't even see her like as a person clearly before
yeah.
this, and he doesn't recognize her own autonomy and humanity. And so by the
You
end,
could have done that without a rape,
no, you
though.
totally could have. Yeah, yeah, you totally could have done this better and in a less uncomfortable way.
Yeah,
But then by the end, you know, he's not forcing her to do anything. He asks her, "Do you trust me?" And then she replies, "I trust you." And yeah, it's uncomfortable and it doesn't need to be in the movie that way, but I guess it works. But like a lot of people have been watching Blade Runner for the first time recently for preparation for 2049, and a lot of people are coming across this scene and being like, "Why didn't anyone tell me there's a rape scene in Blade Runner?" And it's like, yeah, why aren't more people talking about that? That's kind
it's
of a heavy thing.
it's kind of because that stuff. I mean, the stuff in that movie that's memorable isn't that.
Yeah,
I mean, part of it is literally like I have sat down to watch Blade Runner, and that moment happens, and I'm like, oh yeah, this scene is in the movie.
yeah,
Like I sometimes I just don't remember because it's not a moment that really stick. Even like with the awfulness of it, it's a boring moment of the movie. It's kind of like an all right, I guess we're going there, and then it's really not explored in a way that it really should have been
no, it is not.
if you were gonna go there. Um, and I mean, literally, it shouldn't. I'm not saying it shouldn't be in the movie. I don't know what. There's no real way to like fix Blade Runner, like other than take out the shitty voiceover and remove the happy ending. But like, there's not like a thing where you go like, well, this is how this moment should have played out. It's like, well, this is how it played out in Blade Runner, and now we kind of have to live with that. um, I mean, all the stuff with Deckard is kind of boring, honestly.
He's not
Uh,
an interesting character.
he's not interesting. He's not a great detective. He's got like two moments that are kind of good detective moments. The guy giving the Voight comp test in the opening of the movie does a better job. In my opinion, that scene like is really intense, partly because of that actor's performance. Um, and just here's something that's like I think kind of the opening of Blade Runner. I think kind of sums up all my feelings about it because you have that really great scene where they give the Voight comp test, and it's kind of getting intense, and you don't totally know what's going on because they don't explain exactly what, but you can piece it together. Um, and then at the very end, I'll tell you about my mother, and he shoots the guy, and then there's a really awkward cut to the city, and you're like, what the fuck was that? And every time I watch the movie, that edit like specifically takes me out of the movie for like a second. Like, do you feel that too? Like, it's a really bad cut.
It's, you know what? It's a very jarring cut. I don't know if I'd define it as bad, but you know, I hadn't seen a movie like that by that point when I first saw it, and so I was just like, "This is different. I better settle in." Oh, whoa! And
It's just
it
it
just
just
it
feels
makes you.
like the last scene didn't even end, and then we're in the middle of a scene that hardly began. It's a very odd cut,
Yeah,
and
odd.
maybe
I
it's
would definitely call it odd.
maybe it's intentionally jarring, but still, I mean, that's kind of how it might be intentional, but it's still jarring.
Yeah.
And that's Blade Runner to me. There's a lot of weird stuff in it that I just recognize as weird, and I just know I can live with it though.
Yeah, like is it intentional? Is it not? I don't know, but it's working for me.
And it's also weird because there's like, the foundation of it is also like kind of really bizarre because it's a Philip K. Dick book,
Hmm.
and there's a lot of weird elements that are kind of brushed over. Like the fact that the one girl is a member of a kick murder squad. Like, what is that? Like, what the fuck is that? Like, why are there kick murder squads in the future? What does that mean? And it's barely, I mean, it just kind of establishes that she can fight. But it's such an odd little thing. It's such an odd phrase to use in a movie that is so dour and serious and moody. Like, that feels like something out of Barbarella. And you get a lot of that. There's a lot of weird, jarring stuff. And the other stuff in it is, it's got a lot of noir visuals. Like, it's kind of like a classic neo-noir type film. But story-wise, it's a terrible noir film. You have a terrible detective and a terrible femme fatale in the form of Rachel. Who's an interesting character, but they don't do much with her. They kind of forget about her for long stretches of the movie.
It's very touch and go in how it develops this quote unquote relationship with the characters, but given like I call it it's very fever dream. It feels like vignettes rather than like a whole cohesive story being told.
It's almost like how the implanted memories are, man.
Hey, well, I mean that's kind of true.
Yeah, but I don't know if that's intentional. But I get that it creates that vibe. You know?
Intentional or otherwise, it definitely is the final product of the movie for me.
We're given someone else's memories, and then we fill a lot of the blanks in with our own thoughts.
It definitely feels like that, and it's a big part of the reason why I love the movie so much. And there's minimal plot progression. It's not a propulsive movie at all. You just kind of feel things out. There's long stretches of silence too, where it's just the Vangelis score, blaring and kind of carrying you through the city.
Yeah, I mean,
I just like the way that feels.
If you change that pace, the movie would work even less. Like, you can't really give this movie a fast pace. Because then it wouldn't be Blade Runner. I mean, it would be a different movie. It would maybe be Akira or something, but it wouldn't be Blade Runner.
I think it'd be more the Total Recall remake.
Yeah.
Which is not a compliment.
Yeah. There was actually a couple of Total Recall, I felt, references in Blade Runner 2049. I mean, Philip K. Dick, so there's a connection.
Hey. Yeah,
I'm not sure what else to say about, because that's a movie that's just been talked about endlessly. And there's no real definitive way to talk about it. Like, you can't, other than saying the special effects are great, which they are.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the only thing I think everyone agrees on. And then if you talk to anyone else, you can talk to two people who absolutely love it, and they can love it for two completely different reasons.
It's almost David Lynchian in that kind of way, where everyone walks away feeling differently about different things.
Yeah, I was thinking a lot about Lynch watching the new Blade Runner.
He would direct the shit out of one.
I know. Don't keep him in his world.
No, I'm not. I'm saying I want him to. I'm just like hypothetically. It's a hypothetical only, not something I want.
I don't know. Honestly, this will sound weird, but no, I would not want a David Lynch Blade Runner. Because then it wouldn't be Blade Runner. It'd be a David Lynch film.
It'd be Dune.
It would, yeah. And Dune is, a very bad movie that I also love. But it is not a good movie.
Yeah, that's Blade Runner. Just it exists in a very weird form, intentional or otherwise. I like the way it makes me feel.
Yeah. Some great shit. Yeah. Check it out if you haven't. Why are you listening to this?
You're a cop. I had your job once.
Things were simpler then.
What do you want?
I want to ask you some questions. What happened?
I covered my tracks, scrambled the records. We were being hunted.
By who?
They know you're here.
You do not know what pain is yet. You will learn.
Bring it to me.
This breaks the world.
We have to go.
I'm coming with you.
Blade Runner 2049. I haven't given my thoughts on it, but I also loved it. Mostly.
Yeah.
Mostly. There's some issues here and there, obviously. But I'm on the flip side of you with the central character. I love Officer K. I legitimately adore this character. He's just a very sad little robot boy who wants to be
He's more
real.
interesting than Harrison Ford ever was.
Yeah,
by
far.
in the original. But there's a couple characters floating around Ryan Gosling's character that I just found more interesting. It's not necessarily that
Jared
he
Leto?
isn't. If it wasn't played by Jared Leto, that character was kind of interesting. And I constantly had moments where I'm like, oh, this is kind of, oh, fuck yeah, it's Jared Leto.
Oh my god. Okay, let's get that out of the way. That's my big negative for the movie.
Yeah, Jared Leto's in it.
I know some people see something in him. I see nothing in his performances. He's just playing dress up. He's just like he's play acting. He's not actually giving a performance.
He's Jim Carrey. Jim Carrey, whenever you watch him in a movie, you can tell he is trying his hardest. And that's not a good thing. Because you shouldn't be, it should look effortless. Actors are supposed to make really difficult things look effortless. And Jared Leto is actively trying to show you how hard he's trying to act. And with every delivery, it's like, this is dialogue. And, I mean, you're like, yeah, thanks, buddy. And it's just not good, I mean, I just thought the character, the visual of that character was interesting. And even though he looked like Jesus, which is, a little like, hey, yeah, he's got a God complex, whatever. But I like the blind element with his little eyes floating around the room.
Yeah, I would have liked that more if, like, I guess they don't need to do that much more with it, but it's just the character's such a bust for me because of Leto's performance. And I don't know if that's fair, but that's what I came away with.
Well, in a weird way, I thought it worked because of Leto's bad performance. Because, like, Jared Leto's a horrible asshole. And his character in this movie is a horrible asshole. But he's trying not to be. And he doesn't see himself as a horrible asshole. And you get that vibe in the movie. Like, it really feels like, how Steve Jobs kind of presented himself. I mean, Steve Jobs, everyone knows Steve Jobs was a horrible, horrible person. And in every interview, though, he's like, your grandfather, kinda. He's like, hey, I just had a dream. And I made it happen on whimsy, and I was changing the world. And in the meantime, I helped found Pixar because I believed in their philosophy. And that story about me yelling at John Lasseter totally didn't happen. And, it kind of worked in a weird way for me. But but I just love this idea that Jared Leto keeps getting cast in big movies and then he's in them for like 2 minutes.
Oh my god, this is my favorite new trope. Like, this is a
Yeah.
great trend. Continue it.
Like, keep hiring him, but like film all these scenes that you know you're gonna cut. Being like you're talking to him and you're like, oh yeah, this guy, he's central to the plot, and then you're covering up the phone so you can hide your laughter.
Oh,
He thinks
you
we're
know
gonna
what
give him a big
scene?
part.
You know what scene I genuinely loved with him though?
What?
With him and when he meets Deckard, and it's like it's very clearly inspired by like Heat, where it's constantly shifting between the two as they're talking, and depending on who is in control of the conversation, the lighting kind of warps around them. Then the faces get darker, and then someone else starts talking when they're in charge, and then the lighting fades away on their face when someone else is in charge. And I thought that was pretty good stuff. Deakins and Villeneuve do the heavy lifting on that, but
Yeah.
Leto's in it. So
I think Leto, the set they kept Leto on, has more character than he does.
Oh yeah, that thing is gorgeous.
It was great. The two sets he appears on in the movie are both more interesting than him. But that could be said about a lot of things in this movie, because you're kind of just like every other scene you're like, wow. And just looking at it, you're thinking about a lot of stuff. At least I was.
Yeah, I thought about the world more so than the characters in this one, for the most part. But specifically with Leto, and I was actually surprised. Who's the actress who plays Lieutenant Joshi? Great.
Yeah, Robin Wright.
Thank you. Yeah, Robin Wright, great actress who has really nothing here. Also,
So she had a couple moments.
she's good, but I mean the character also feels I don't get it. Maybe
but she's kind of the. I don't know, but she's kind of like the Emmett Walsh of the original. I mean, like Emmett Walsh when he calls Deckard in, kind of has like a weird kind of way he's talking to him.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like this weird, like you're like, there's this unspokenness between both of them. And like Emmett Walsh is almost kind of getting pleasure out of sending Deckard on this horrible mission. And there's kind of like that weird unspokenness between her and Gosling that I think I'll pick up more on when I rewatch it. But hey, and I don't know.
I like when she was in it, but
yeah,
when she gets killed off, I was like, I don't think I understood fully what they were going for with that character. But I'm open to that, like on rewatches.
Yeah. Well, that's what this movie is going to be, a movie I watch a lot. Probably in the background while I'm doing other things, but I will be watching it a lot. I'm probably taking some notes too. My room is just turned into tons and tons of notebooks on movies. I look like the psycho from Seven, except all it is me complaining about things wrong in Man of Steel. But there was a lot of good actresses in this movie who kind of get relegated to weird places. I think there's probably a couple problems with how the women are all portrayed in this movie.
Yeah,
because they're all objects.
Mm-hmm.
Literally. One is an object that he carries in his pocket.
Yep.
But that was honestly, she was a more interesting character to me than Ryan Gosling.
Yeah,
and Ryan Gosling's an interesting character in this. Like, that's the weird thing. It's not like I'm saying they did a bad job with Gosling's character. It's just they kept introducing these other characters who were even more interesting than him.
Yeah, and to Joy, yeah, she's literally an object. But she's a fascinating character in her own right. And what I really like between Joy and Kay and their relationship, there's that idea of like, well, how much of it is programming, how much of it is like legitimate. But regardless of that, how they both want to be more quote unquote human, more human than human. Hey. That sense of like melancholy and longing, which is like so pivotal to the original Blade Runner for me, really felt like, oh yeah, like this they know what they're going for. They know what made Blade Runner special with its perfection and imperfection, and
Yeah, everyone
blurring
showed
lines
up.
between the two.
Everyone showed up and knew exactly what to do. And they put Ridley Scott in a back room and gave him a coloring book. And occasionally asked him like what some stuff he thinks is interesting about science. And then out of his ramblings, they got some good ideas. Because I mean, I'm mocking Ridley Scott, but I can feel his like fingerprints on this movie. It's just it's literally just I can feel like what ideas were his, or stuff that he might have been interested in and that he's talked about to people over the years, and just that because it wasn't in his hands, it was executed much better than he ever would have executed it.
Oh, I don't know about that.
Yeah, no, if Ridley Scott had directed this movie, it would have been a train wreck of epic proportions.
Well, we feel very differently about modern Scott, so.
Yeah, he sucks, and you're wrong. Fucking Gods of Egypt, motherfucker.
Oh, that's not. We don't talk about that.
Fucking Gods of Egypt.
That's not
Fucking
important.
fucking Half of American Gangster.
I'll go to bat for American Gangster.
Half of American Gangster is one of the best crime movies I've ever seen. The other half has Russell Crowe in it, which is just all terrible. Fuck movies.
Except Blade Runner 2049.
Except Blade Runner 2049. And one other thing they did that the original Blade Runner did, that this movie does, is that you know exactly how everything's going to play out once everything is established.
You know what? I did not.
What are you, an idiot?
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I'm just fucking with you.
Everything with K, I legitimately had no idea until the very end where the third act is finally set up. Everything after Las Vegas, there you see how it's going to play out.
Well, all right. The only thing for me was, all right, so how do you pronounce the director's name? I always fuck it up.
Denis Villeneuve.
Denis Villeneuve. Sorry. Is a guy, I have such mixed feelings on him, but I've kind of come around to him. Because the first movie I ever saw of his was Prisoners, and I hated Prisoners.
I don't like it either. Thank you for
with a
sane.
passion. I mean, like I literally walked out of that movie like that was one of the worst movies I've ever seen. And I've tried rewatching it now, even like with like the respect I've gained for him over the years. I've rewatched Prisoners and it hasn't gotten any better. But you know, he did Arrival last year, which kind of blew me away. The first half of Sicario was really good. Enemy was pretty damn good. Like he's gotten progressively better in my eyes over the years, but I still don't really know what to make of him. This movie might be the moment where I'm like, all right, he's actually good. But I mean, I'm honestly probably not going to know until I rewatch this movie a few more times. But for me, like, because the moment that the idea that Rachel had a child, she had a baby. The moment that idea was mentioned, I was like, oh no. And I was like, please don't have Ryan Gosling be that baby. And thankfully, I knew in the back of my head, because there's, the whole thing about the memories of replicants are based on real memories. Which it turns out that's only true in the original movie. Since then, that practice has been outlawed. But we are later told that, yes, his memory he has this memory that connects him to this baby that they know was born. And it turns out that, yes, that is a real memory. But it might not be his. And I was basically the whole movie just hoping it wasn't going to be his memory. And I was very afraid that it was going to end up being that, oh, no, he was his son. But thankfully, that ended up not being the case.
Do you think the movie still would have worked if he had been?
No.
I don't think so either.
Honestly, that was honestly, because the moment the idea of a child is introduced, the first place I went was like, okay, Gosling's the son. And that's the least interesting thing to do. And for the movie to string me along, because the whole movie, like, it's stringing you along, but I'm literally just waiting to get answers I feel like I already know. And the only one I wasn't like 100% sure on was whether or not he was the son or if he was the clone. And thankfully, he's the clone of that child. He's the replicant. I didn't see the twist coming that it was the girl until it was, kind of established that it's definitely a girl. Like, once it was like, it's a girl and she exists and we've kept her hid, and I'm like, oh, okay, then it's that girl.
Okay, yeah, like, but that's like all the way at the beginning of the third act.
Yeah, but what I was saying is, but the moment the child was introduced, I got all the ideas about either Gosling is the child or he's the memory. He has the memories of that child.
I guess I underestimated them because I was convinced Gosling was the child, and I was just like, oh no. Like,
yeah, like literally, I was just
okay, sure.
I was like, the whole time I was just sitting there going, I hope it doesn't do that. But the movie was going so well, I was kind of like, they're not gonna, they'll be smart enough with it. And that was, I mean, to take me back to Prisoners, the whole time watching Prisoners, when I saw it in theaters, I was like, this is so dumb. I hope there's something smart at the end of all of this that makes all of this worth it. And no, Prisoners probably had one of the dumbest endings ever.
Oh, that's my favorite part of the movie.
But it turns into complete schlock. And, like, Grandma was the villain the whole time. And it just, but, so, there was a chance it could have gone that way with this movie, but thankfully it didn't. But at the same time, like, there's no real mystery. You know that it's either going to go one of two ways. And that's not bad. I mean, because the original Blade Runner, I honestly think you pretty much know how that movie is going to end when you start. There's a lot of stuff that happens in between that you would never predict, but you know how the movie's going to end when you start the movie.
I don't know if it's that cut and dry, but they're not, plot-wise, they're not very complex. I'd say, like, emotionally and just, like, how the movies feel, those where the richness come in,
Yeah, and how the movie decides to tell you its story beats is where it becomes interesting.
Yeah, absolutely. And where it's actually some of what I thought were going to be complaints for 2049 were going to be, because the first half is mostly plot driven.
Mm-hmm.
I would argue. There's nice stuff where we get the world building again. That's classic Blade Runner stuff. You get the texture of the world. But if you look at how they're framed, they're very different because Kay and Deckard are very different characters.
Yeah.
The opening to Blade Runners, that that vast landscape with the city lights and the smog and the flames. Here it's just flat, white, dirt, nothing.
And yeah,
that's good. That's some good shit.
And also the movie right out of the gate, Gosling's a replicant.
Mm-hmm. Oh,
like,
yeah,
doesn't even,
love that.
I mean, because they easily, like, in a lesser hands, we would have had the exact same mystery of, is he or is he not a replicant? And it almost flips it on its head, I mean, it's kind of an inverse of the is Deckard a replicant thing when we start wondering if he really is the child of Rachel and Deckard. It's just, but again, yeah. But one thing though, one thing in the opening that kind of bugged me was the endless field of solar panels.
Yeah, a little hokey.
That's not how solar energy works. Solar energy, it's more the issue with solar energy is more about batteries and not really having. There needs to be a lot of panels, but we don't need endless fields of solar panels. We just need to find better ways of integrating it into, like, our daily lives. As some have suggested, making our roads solar panels, but I guess in a world where roads don't exist,
might be arbitrary.
Yeah. Still, it's. But after that, I loved it. Like, all the landscape shots totally worked, especially that huge wall.
Oh my god, that thing is amazing.
Which was just like, wow.
Oh, there's
And the
that one
fact that,
shot. Oh, so go ahead.
well, the one thing that was also really great about this movie with its like landscape shots is that it kept the same type of perspective we would have gotten in the original Blade Runner. Like every now and then it goes outside of it, and we get a little faster paced stuff, but it sticks to the constraints the original film had that were more out of the original film had because they couldn't show those effects in any other way. Now we live in an age where you can show anything you want can appear on the screen. But they made a very conscious decision to keep the camera in very like tight places at times, or places that felt like you were looking at models at times, but they weren't models; they're digital shots.
Yeah, and initially that was kind of bugging me because I like the free-flowing nature of the first Blade Runner a lot, and I still think I still love that movie far more than I love this one.
Mm-hmm.
If it all is just preference, where you're just spending time in that world and you're feeling the environment. It's so tangible and there's like this grimy texture to it all. And this one doesn't have that in the same sense, but it's exploring different things, and the environments are different. Like we've already seen vast portions of LA. The first Blade Runner is just in the damp, murky streets of Neo Los Angeles. This goes to San Diego, which I love, is literally just a giant dumpster in the future.
That seems to be ruled by the Lord Humongous.
Yeah, that shit's hilarious. And because K is a replicant, his worldview is more constricted, and he's more confined to the narrow hallways of like the LAPD. He doesn't talk to people. He goes home and he has a digital girlfriend.
Mm-hmm.
May or may not actually want free will because she doesn't know what it is. Is it her programming? And I just really like that stuff, where once I tuned into that, I got into the movie. Like you were saying with your experience with the first Blade Runner, that was like me with this movie, but in the span of half an hour.
Yeah.
And then once I honed in on that, I was like, oh my God, this is good. This is my shit. And then as the movie progresses, it gets more open, and then you get that more fever dream, free-flowing style narrative going on, because Kay is exploring the potential humanity inside of him and what that means, in reality. And so I was like, oh my God, this is fucking good.
Well, yeah,
I was on board.
And you also have it was just, once Gosling starts to fall apart like halfway through, was when I kind of really started falling in love with it, because it was just really interesting to see a character who was really kind of fine with not having free will. I mean, that's kind of what he's living in beforehand, and then he suddenly has his whole world turned upside down, and he realizes he's not what he thought he was this whole time. That was just really fun. I'm gonna really enjoy revisiting it, because I'm not a guy who picks up on every little detail when I watch a movie the first time. So it's going to take me a long time to really get to the heart of what's going on with Gosling, but it was still fun to explore.
Yeah, it really was. And something else I think worth noting is that it's very similar to Thief. In the original, Michael Mann's original first film, Thief, you don't see the tops of buildings. You just see skyscrapers, and it's almost like designed like a prison. That's what he was going for, and how they framed Chicago in that film. In the original Blade Runner, you see them going on tops of rooftops a lot and exploring a lot of scenery in LA. In Blade Runner 2049, you don't see a lot of tops of buildings. It's very confined pillars, very much like a prison in itself.
Well, there are scenes where we do go above the buildings.
Very few, though.
No, but we go above them, but then we're almost always immediately shown that there's another taller building, like nearby. So it's like no matter how high you're going, it's still there.
Yeah, and that really adds to Kay's journey, I feel like.
Yeah. One thing, though, I got to point out is that it's kind of ridiculous that Deckard is hiding out in Las Vegas.
Yeah.
Because Las Vegas is not a city built to last. Everything in Vegas is built to last maybe 10, 15 years. It's a city that's meant to get rebuilt constantly. And so it's a little weird that Deckard goes and there's all these monuments that have somehow lasted.
Well, maybe
But
they
whatever.
build it to. Well, no, look, the monuments are falling apart as we
Yeah,
see.
yeah, but the fact that they're even there, that's not Vegas. That's not Vegas. If Vegas suddenly changed that way, why isn't there a statue to Penn and Teller? But honestly, that scene, that shootout with the hologram Elvis that is malfunctioning, that might be the best thing I've seen all year.
Oh, that was
That
awesome.
scene was so fucking good and so just like eerie. I mean, that was like when I was like, and that was after I was kind of a little put off because when Harrison Ford first showed up, he was a little too much old man Harrison Ford, and not, I was feeling like I was watching Harrison Ford at first and not Deckard, but it managed to switch that around at some point. But hey, I'm glad he was only in it for like 10 minutes. Not because I'm like anti Harrison Ford. You needed Gosling to drive this movie.
Yeah, it wasn't a team up movie. Even when they
Yeah,
meet, it wasn't a team up thing. It's just part of the narrative, a natural
they meet up and
presence.
then they are immediately separated.
And I was honestly
Um,
surprised they didn't kill him off because I felt like that was going to be a thing for Harrison Ford.
It'd be great if he just kept coming back with his old characters and then dying.
Yeah, but nope, works for this movie too.
Yeah. Although I think part of that might be because I think this movie was trying to set up a sequel that is probably now not going to happen.
Do you feel that way?
Yeah, I mean, here's the thing. It's setting up a sequel in a way that we haven't seen in a long time, which is that this movie made sure to tell its story and then left a couple doors open that we didn't need closed to be like, and if we wanted to explore this, we always could. I mean, that's really all it did. Because so many movies today that set up sequels literally leave huge, important plot details for sequels. And that's why most movies today are kind of really half-baked. You feel like you're only getting like the first act of a story every time. I mean, that's the fucked up thing about Marvel for me lately is that every movie of theirs I've seen, it feels like we barely get out of the first act. And then it's like, all right, come next year. But this movie, it tells its story, but then it's like, yeah, and then the rebellion's coming, and we're going to overthrow everything, and the people will finally be free. But that doesn't matter. Like, we don't need to see that in this movie. In fact, it's probably, I'm honestly glad we're probably not going to get a sequel to it. This was fine by me, but I know that Sony did not greenlight this movie without thinking they were starting another franchise.
Oh, that's fucking hilarious. I didn't even consider that because it's Sony. It's like, all
Yeah,
right, one of the best reviewed films of the year, maybe one of the best reviewed movies of all time, but it's a box office bomb, so it doesn't matter.
this is the only property they've rebooted that's worked, and it's the movie that's not going to make any money. It'll make its money back, but it's not going to be a hit.
You think so?
I think it'll make its money back because it'll probably be bigger overseas. It'll probably be huge in Japan. Not that that can really carry a movie, but I think it'll break even, and then it'll be like, well, it didn't make enough. And then Sony will say they lost money so they can get a tax write-off. I mean, that's Hollywood.
Yeah.
That's Sony Hollywood. And even then, they were probably happy that one of the most iconic shots in science fiction also featured a Coca-Cola logo. Because that was a good excuse for them to have the Sony logo everywhere in this movie.
Yeah, I caught that, and I was like, of course.
I can't complain about it. Because that's Blade Runner.
Mm-hmm.
Blade Runner had those logos. The Atari logo showing up was a little, but the Pan Am logo shows up. the Pan Am logo shows up, and Pan America hasn't existed for about 20 years. So that was interesting. And that's kind of like in 2001. There's Pan Am and Bell Telephone, which are two companies that don't exist anymore.
Fun little time capsules.
Yeah. 2001, the year we finally reached Jupiter.
Oh.
Thank God things worked out and we didn't elect Ronald Reagan. And how's that Star Wars program working, Ronnie? All right. Almost started a nuclear war. Hopefully we won't elect another idiot that almost does that.
Oh,
We could all die before you post this episode.
Fuck, that's depressing.
All right, one of the more lopsided things about the movie is that the dialogue in the first, I would say, like maybe 20, 30 minutes of the movie is very off. It's very exposition driven. It's the classic M. Night Shyamalan thing of, well, of course you know, and then someone explains something to someone that other character should already know. Which is every other scene in the last Airbender movie.
Oh my god.
Like, there's the scene where the guy's like, oh, you remember the blackout that destroyed all our information? You know, the blackout that destroyed everything? The blackout? And Gosling's like, yes, I know about the blackout that destroyed everything. And you're like, yeah, like that was a little off. That was like at the moments in the beginning where I was kind of like not digging it. And then, but it stopped that fairly quickly. There's a couple more moments like it, but not as egregious as that.
Yeah, I would agree. But I would also say that worked for me in the long run as well, because like I said, like the plot focused first half, maybe first third even. Once it starts kicking in with the ideas and the character driven narrative, where it really starts opening up, it all just flows for me.
Well,
like,
here's something about this movie that I think is kind of similar to the original Blade Runner in a way. The main plot of this movie, the MacGuffin, essentially, is that a replicant has had a child. Correct?
Yep.
That's the least interesting thing about the movie. And you wouldn't think that. That seems like a pretty big deal. It's a big deal for everyone in the world, but of all the ideas in this movie, that's the one I'm thinking about the least, having walked out of the movie. I'm thinking more about hologram Frank Sinatra than that child. And, I think that's a lot of what the main story of Blade Runner isn't really is the least interesting thing about it. And I think if you can live with that, you'll love the movie. And I don't get why people can't live with that. It's not like Blade Runner is like this. It's not like Blade Runner is a prequel to another important science fiction film that really needed to have well-established characters and a story that made fucking a lick of sense. And dialogue that didn't make you want to shoot your brains out.
Well, we can talk about
If someone in this movie had started talking about sand, I would have fucking put 2 barrels in my mouth.
But then they make you ask, like, what even is sand? Like, is that relative to something about existence?
Is it only coarse because I'm programmed to think it is?
They would make an interesting.
Does it get everywhere, or is sand already everywhere, like dust in the wind?
And then Hans Zimmer's like, "Bwom!" Start kicking it. Okay, I want to talk about the score really quick.
You found a sock in a drawer. Blah!
I will say, I think when the score works, it works at like swoosh, like nothing but net. And then other times, it is a Hans Zimmer score when he stretched a little too thin. And I wish he hadn't been the one to score it, and I would have really liked to have heard what Johan Johansson had come up with.
Yeah,
How do you
but
feel?
I don't know. I think the score was the best comedic sidekick in recent film history.
Oh.
He was like Costello to Gosling's Abbott. Uh, I mean, it. I don't know. I liked the score, but I was kind of laughing at it because it really did come in at moments that made you go like,
Like, of course.
like big moment has just happened. Like, literally, like every couple of minutes that would happen.
You know who would have done a really good score for this movie? Daft Punk.
Yeah, maybe.
I I think their Tron Legacy stuff's really underrated. That's an incredible score.
Yeah,
But
they had the misfortune of getting attached to a very underwhelming movie.
we'll agree to disagree. But I think those guys are excellent musicians, and I would have loved to have heard what they could do with this.
Hmm.
But again, when it works, like there's this image of when Kay and Joy go to San Diego, and he's like, "Want to go for a ride?" And then it cuts to the dam, and there's like release of water, and then there's like this synth that just kicks off, and you're like, "Whoa!" I was like, "Oh yeah, I'm in a Blade Runner sequel. That's right. I forgot." And it just like I felt like I was floating for a second in the theater.
You know, I didn't get any real emotional reaction like that.
Oh wow.
Yeah, I never really got that emotional during the movie, but it still might be my favorite movie of the year. Um, I know I'm saying this though, but I know there was one moment where I was feeling really emotional, and now I cannot remember what that moment was. Um, which is odd. I don't think I've ever had that happen.
Was it the Cowboy Bebop ending?
No, it
Okay.
was not the Cowboy Bebop ending.
Okay, because that's what that totally is. We can agree on that, right?
Yeah, I guess. I was thinking of Drive.
Oh, okay.
I mean, because Gosling, and I was thinking of Real Human Being.
Oh, yeah, that totally would have worked in this movie.
Yeah, yeah, fucking get what's his fuck to do this movie and then have cannibals in it for some reason. Oh.
Neon Demon's amazing.
The Neon Demon is amazing, and the best part about it is I know exactly what moment people started booing at it. um, but
Refn would have, I think, done an interesting Blade Runner movie too.
yeah, I think it would have been more of a Refn movie than a Blade Runner movie, though.
Mm.
Which is fine. I mean, I love Refn. It's just I I didn't expect to get another Blade Runner movie, honestly. Like I had this weird thing about this movie because I love Blade Runner, but I was not excited about this movie at all. Um, Even with everyone like going this weekend, like, oh my god, it's amazing. I wasn't like going like because I've mentioned before on the show I never needed another Blade Runner movie. Like I never felt the need for it. Mostly because I was honestly not expecting it. But what I got was another Blade Runner movie, and it made me realize that this is a type of movie that really doesn't happen too often. And it's a movie that is going to probably influence people a lot over the next 10 years. I honestly think it'll end up being as influential as the original Blade Runner. I think I can already say that, having only watched it this one time.
Whoa, that's a bold statement. I like that you made
I
it.
know it is. I mean, well, it's got a tough look. I mean, the only problem is Blade Runner basically invented cyberpunk. So it's probably not going to do that. But the one thing is, this is going to be the movie everyone points to it as predicting a lot of future technology. Because a lot of the stuff that I think was showcased in this is not too far off. I mean, when was that? All right. was that a digitally de-aged Sean Young in this?
Yes.
So that wasn't a double or anything.
A double, but also
Did they bring her
They
back?
brought
Like,
her.
did she? All right. I just wasn't sure if they, but regardless, because that looked, Digital Tarkin was last year, and Digital Tarkin is already kind of not aged well.
That's the biggest mistake in Rogue One. I will continue
And
to stand by that.
but like, I'll have to look at it. I was trying to find flaws in it the whole time she was on screen, which is exactly what Harrison Ford's character is doing in that moment, which adds a weird metatextual layer to all this. And I couldn't. It looked so good. Like it, and that was like a moment of that was kind of like a gut punch moment of when she walked on the screen. Not really because of the character elements, but because I suddenly realized that we really aren't that far off from an all digital movie that looks real. Like I'm like 10 years. It's gonna happen. And that to me, and that's what is this movie is kind of about, a lot of that. That we're gonna start experiencing humanity in a lot of different ways without human elements. I mean, like, we can talk about how Gosling has this weird relationship with his hologram computer friend, woman, wife thing. But that's gonna be all. That's probably gonna be all of us in 50 years. Like, how we interact with humanity is gonna change a lot, especially when we can start recreating. When the tools to do those sort of digital effects become something everyone can do, which isn't that far off. I mean, it sounds like that's something that's very far away, but it's really not. That's going to change everything. And that was kind of like the meta layer of this movie, which the meta stuff is usually the thing I'm least interested in a movie. But it was really interesting here because, like, the whole movie, I was kind of thinking about how we really aren't that far off from all digital, like a completely digitally generated movie that looks real.
I hadn't really considered that to that extent, and yeah, that does. I totally see where you're coming from now, in terms of this movie.
I've been thinking about that a lot, like, lately. So I brought a lot of those ideas to this movie. Because I mean, this was probably going to air before our Star Wars stuff, I'm guessing.
Yes, I plan to get this out like immediately the week. Hopefully by the morning after we record this. I'm just gonna let it load. I got all the graphics ready. But
yeah, but it's gonna probably come out before that. So, but because of a lot of the digital filmmaking that I have been thinking about digital filmmaking a lot lately, and that we're gonna get to a point where someone on their home computer could remake Star Wars with their computer. Like, you don't need any of the actors. You don't need any of the sets. You can digitally make everything and it'll look real. And it'll sound real. And then you're going to start getting people who can make their own versions of Star Wars. And so then you're going to start seeing all sorts of weird, as so long as copyright dies, which is something that needs to happen. But we're about to enter a really weird future if Trump doesn't get us all killed. And it's freakish. It's very. I mean, there's a lot of melancholy in this movie, as you know, and there's a lot of weirdness in how relationships are in the future, because it really would change everything if we could all have digital friends that are programmed to be our friends. I mean, her kind of touched on this a little bit. But it's not that far away. And how it's just the way relationships are going to be a really different thing. And I'm not talking about, like, sexual relationships. I'm talking about any relationship. I'm talking about how we talk to each other. It's about to become very different. And even, and it might sound weird, but concepts that we live with today are very new and we don't realize it. Like the idea of dying more than 20 miles from where you were born is a very weird idea 50 years ago. And now it's a thing everyone does. So, I mean, even the concept of the teenager is only like 70 years old. So, film is barely over a century old. And that's changed the world. I mean, books are older than movies, and movies have done far more than books ever have in a shorter period of time. So that really, a lot of what was happening in Blade Runner 2049 was making me think about that. And just not just as like, tangible future stuff, but also kind of story and just what was going on in the narrative of Blade Runner. And I just feel like this is going to be a movie that people kind of look back on and be like, wow, it kind of called everything. So long as it's not saved on hard drives. Because this movie kind of points out that that's not a good idea. Because that's probably something that's going to happen.
It was. I'm kind of bummed that the Star Wars stuff I haven't been putting it out yet because I'm saving it for, the trailer. Spoiler, I guess this is going to come out the same time as that trailer, so this will be the announcement as well. But yeah, because in our Attack of the Clones, we talk about that whole digital transfer, the digital degradation.
Yeah, it's going to be fucking And I mean, and also I'm putting my money down now. YouTube will be gone within 10 years.
Fuck. R.I.P. to all these. Catch us on SoundCloud.
I'm just saying YouTube's not making it into the next decade. I mean, not making it through the next decade. It'll make it to the next decade, but unless it radically changes. And if it does, it won't be YouTube anymore. We've just been shown enough evidence that the YouTube model doesn't work. So.
Are we talking about YouTube Red?
No, I'm not talking about YouTube Red. I'm talking about YouTube. The idea of just anyone uploading video. It's not. Whatever comes next, you're going to have to pay money to upload videos to it. That's the only way it can work. So
this discussion got so serious.
Yeah, I'm sorry. This is
good.
I mean, this is what I was thinking about coming out of Blade Runner, and I've been thinking about a lot of stuff like this lately. Because honestly, the weird thing is, as horrible as the Blade Runner future looks, I kind of wish I could live in it. Because I'm always fascinated with the future, and like even I've always just. Even the horrible stuff still looks better than a lot of stuff we're kind of stuck with right now. And that's not even me talking about just like Trump. It's me kind of just talking about a lot of weird things. I just know people have to live with that. I know will get solved, but not in time for a lot of people. And specifically, I mean, I talk about my chronic illness. My chronic illness only has about 10 years of research. Like serious research behind it. And it's a thing that affects more Americans than cancer. But because it doesn't really kill anyone, there's not a lot of money going towards it. But in the future, it's probably going to be something that we can take care of very easily. But we're not there yet. So, yeah.
Oh, shit. How am I supposed to follow that up? Jesus Christ.
Just admit I'm right about everything.
At least on this episode, for now.
No, I've always been right.
No.
I guess you want to talk about your bullshit Alien Covenant nonsense, you fucker.
No.
You goddamn piece of shit. Fucking run that movie over with a fucking steamroller.
Alien Covenant is a borderline masterstroke. But it's not
It's not as
good
fucker.
Blade Runner
Fucking
2049.
monster. You disgusting slab of fucking waste. Fucking bullshit.
But it does not have the same meditative nature as Blade Runner 2049.
There's more in Jared Leto's bad performance than there
Oh
is
my
in
god,
all of
no,
Alien Covenant.
no,
There is
fuck
no
off.
value in Alien Covenant other than it's a good example of how not to make a movie.
There is nothing but value in Alien Covenant.
It's such a waste. It's such a sadness of a film.
Or
And
maybe
again,
it's an analysis of how humanity keeps constructing their own versions of hell. But whatever.
fuck you. Fuck your hell bullshit, Ridley Scott, you dick. Yeah, I read Paradise Lost too. Go fuck yourself.
Blade Runner 2049 I do vastly prefer because I don't consider myself a cynical person. I like the nihilism of the Alien franchise, and it's still my favorite franchise, but I don't really have a way of connecting it to Alien Covenant other than the opening shot, but that's just like a trope for this quote-unquote universe of films, I guess.
They're not in the same universe.
No, they're not, but it's fun to talk about, I think.
Keep the wall up.
Yeah.
Build that wall. Build the wall.
No.
The world is walls, Diego. That was a weird line.
Yeah. Some of the ideas in again, that first half hour, it's a little clunky. It doesn't come together really well.
There's about 10 billion ideas in Blade Runner 2049, and about 1 billion of them don't work.
But the other billion do.
But the other 9 billion are fine.
Yeah.
I don't know. I really love this movie. I was pleasantly surprised at how much I liked it. But also, just so everyone knows that I'm probably full of shit, I also really like Mother. So.
Oh, yeah. Alien Covenant is my mother.
Sure.
Oh, fuck off.
That sounded really odd. They should have. I already said this in the other show, but what's his name should have done Alien Covenant.
Taron Aronofsky.
Oh yeah, he'd be perfect. Give him the Alien films.
Fuck you. Well, you know what? Yeah, I
kind
of like his other movies.
And lock Ridley Scott in a closet.
Blade Runner 2049.
Blade Runner 2049 is on the opposite end of the bell curve of Alien Covenant and is the best movie. I loved it. I was so happy. I was not expecting. I really had zero expectations for it, which might be why I'm having such a positive response. And I was actually fairly pessimistic about it. But it's a movie I know flaws and all, which I'm guessing I haven't even noticed the biggest flaws of it. I'm guessing there are plot holes in this movie that I could drive fucking a boat through. But it doesn't matter because I think I'm still going to be revisiting this movie. It's not going to be a movie I revisit trying to like it. It's a movie that I've accepted that it's probably got problems, but I am willing to live with those problems for the other things that are in it.
As am I. The last thing I want to talk about really quick is the ending. Because this is when, well, for me, I think I've talked about it on the show too. A movie that pulls off a good ending, more often than not, that becomes my favorite part of the movie because it's like that final cherry on top, that little Control-S save, like done. Like that is the final little message you want to send out with your movie. And because of the narrative of this movie being about K's journey to find his own humanity, and like questioning whether robots have souls or replicants have souls, and then early on in the movie, Robin Wright tells him like, "Oh, well, you've been getting along fine without one, a soul, whatever." And then I think at the end there, K, in his journey to reunite Deckard and his half replicant, half human daughter, he found his soul. Not just through that, but like the entire events of the movie and how he learned to be human by not just because he sacrificed himself, but putting needs of others before his own. That selflessness. I think, is very human defining, and I found that very touching. I didn't get like too emotional or anything. It didn't like choke me up, but I really loved this character a lot, and that just really blew me away that this movie exists in this form in this day and age because it's almost 3 hours long, and that they allowed this movie to end the way it did with Ryan Gosling dying on the steps, realizing that his existence did have a purpose and mattered, even if it didn't matter to anybody else. And I thought that was cool.
I like the part where the lady punched the dude from Mulholland Drive and shattered his skull.
I too like that part.
That was my favorite. That was my favorite scene in the movie.
That is not the guy from Mulholland Drive.
Oh, what? It wasn't?
No, that's not the guy from Mulholland. What the fuck are you talking about?
What? Wait, I thought it was the dude who went behind the diner.
No, they look very similar, but that's not him.
It wasn't him, really?
No,
Shit.
white people all look the same.
I guess.
Yeah. No, but I
thought it was similar. Who is he?
His name is David Dastmalchian. He's in Dark Knight and Ant-Man.
Oh God, I don't. Oh yeah, he had this shitty accent in Ant-Man.
Yeah.
That's why I don't remember him. Did he have an accent in Dark Knight? I don't remember him in Dark Knight.
No, he was one of the dudes that Harvey Dent captures after the quote unquote assassination of Commissioner Gordon.
Oh yeah, that scene.
Yeah, that's him. That's the same guy.
Oh, he hasn't aged well. That was only 10 years ago. Oh no. Sorry, guy. I thought you were the dude from Mulholland Drive.
No, that's a different guy. But
I was like, hey, yeah.
That's so fucking funny.
I like the scene where your skull got crushed anyway. That was awesome.
Yeah.
So yeah, guy from Mulholland Drive. I don't care, it's still him.
Okay. But yeah.
It's his replicant. They've cloned him. Fuck you, replicant.
But yeah, this is a hell of a movie. And,
yeah, go see it. Although you should have seen it before listening to our dumbasses ramble about it.
Yeah. But fuck it. Thank you for listening anyways.
I think this proves that I'm a very dumb person, but I like this movie.
No. Because we're talking about two different reasons of why we liked it. You're talking about the future and the impact it's going to have on people, and I'm talking about the impact it had on the people in it.
Like literally, the moments of the movie that I really liked are like the scenes when the replicants could like open a door really well.
Oh my god, I love that.
There were like these weird little beats because they look so human, and then every now and then they would do like a weird thing that reminded you that they were replicants, and you'd be like, oh yeah.
Yeah, like when Ryan Gosling just runs through a fucking wall.
Oh yeah, that made me laugh though.
Oh my god, I loved it.
And Dave Bautista, but Dave Bautista could have been human. He could have done that.
No, that was just him. That was an actual wall.
Yeah.
They had to get
They rewrote the whole movie. Ryan Gosling wasn't meant to be a replicant originally, but because he got thrown through the wall by Dave Bautista,
they had to.
They had to rewrite it.
Oh shit!
So thank you, Dave Bautista, for saving Blade Runner 2049.
Yeah. Before we wrap up, I also want to say that line, "You've never seen a miracle." That's a hokey ass line, but damn it, Dave Bautista will sell anything because that man is a very hardworking actor.
How is he that good at delivering weird lines?
You know what? I have no idea, but my God, he can act. He can act.
He can, which is interesting. I hope to see him have a really interesting career because so far he's popping up in movies I don't expect him to.
Yeah, I'm very happy for him. He's my favorite Guardian of the Galaxy, and he's a highlight in movies like this still.
And one other thing about lines in the movie, Harrison Ford said something about cheese. He was quoting, what was he quoting again?
Tale of Two Cities, I think.
No, I think he was, I thought it was Treasure Island.
Treasure Island. What the fuck? Yes,
Did
that
I-
one is Treasure Island.
I totally blanked. I was like, what the fuck? I've never read Treasure Island.
Oh,
And-
okay, it's good.
And I was like, what the fuck? That was like a weird, because that's like the first line. The whole movie you're waiting for Harrison Ford, and he mentions cheese. And then I thought of The Cheese Stands Alone. Then I thought of I Am the Cheese, which is a terrible book.
So
good
would
night,
you
everyone.
recommend Blade Runner 2049?
I would recommend Blade Runner 2049. I would also recommend burning every copy of I Am the Cheese you find. Seriously, fuck that movie.
Okay.
Fuck that book. It's a shitty movie, too. They made it into a movie that's somehow even worse.
Oh my god.
They made me read it in high school. I'm so angry about that book. It's that Robert Cormier fucker who also wrote The Chocolate War, which was another shitty book. Fucking hated that guy. God damn it.
I too would recommend Blade Runner 2049, and it's one of those movies where I know sometimes people say this a lot, but the more I think about it, the more I'm finding love about it, and it is, yeah, like I mean, you said it best. I can't believe they made a sequel to Blade Runner, not just any other movie.
That is a Blade Runner sequel.
Yeah, that
wasn't changed. I mean, it was Blade Runner.
Yeah,
It's a new story, but it was Blade Runner.
and that's fucking hard to do. That seemed like an impossible task, but they
We'll talk
did
about
it.
another franchise that tried to do something very similar recently. But that is for another day, Diego.
Yes, it is. Again, the announcement that we're doing the Star Wars retrospective leading up to Star Wars: The Last Jedi. Fun stuff coming up there. The trailer will have dropped by the time this is up, so make sure to check all that out. Matt, where can the people find you?
You can find me at EmperorOTN at twitter.com.
And you can find me on Twitter at DEWGOWaffles. Go like, subscribe. If you didn't like and subscribe anyways, because you might find something you do like. Also, we're on Patreon now, where we've raised some money, thankfully, and it's not an embarrassing disaster.
I'll
which is
have you
good.
know, I have given no money.
Thank you. Yes, because if you can't give money, that's okay, because money is hard to give. So just
Thanks
continue
for having me on your show constantly and doing all the work.
Thank you for coming on my show and doing all the work. Just continue liking, subscribing, and sharing, because that helps us a lot. But we're doing retrospectives. We started commentaries. There's a Bad Boys 2 commentary, which is tragic, and I had beer while watching it.
I'll have to check that out.
You gotta watch Bad Boys 2, though.
Yeah, I guess.
Yeah.
Which I don't own.
Oh, it's on Netflix, I think. So there you go.
We got to do a commentary together someday.
I want to so badly.
But I would have to be in the same room as you for that, I would think.
I think I would prefer that, but I think there are still ways around it in case that takes too long. But we'll have to talk about that another time. Thanks for listening. Thanks for watching.
Wait a minute. Ryan Gosling was a replicant?
The future of the species is finally unearthed.
We've been professionally unprofessional.